Japanese junk can be a game collector's treasure. I've got 5 reasons why, with examples. If you've been watching my deep dives into the hard-offs around Japan, I like to focus on the junk section, where you can find lots of cool stuff. The only problem is that the junk section material, the items that you can purchase, is not exchangeable or returnable. You are buying things as they are. Now this can come with some benefits. Generally, everything in the junk section is cheaper than if you were to buy it elsewhere within the same store. That's because junk section items either have not been tested or have something wrong with them. And I'm going to tell you how to differentiate between those two and some really good reasons why you should be jumping into the junk section and picking some items up. Now, first off, let's look at items that you might deem as overstock. Now, stores like to curate their item selection and they don't want 20 copies of Wii Fit cluttering up their display of Wii games. So, for example, here is something, For example, here is something I picked up. It is Metal Gear Solid 2. Now, the reason this would be in the junk section is because there was a re-release in the substance form, and that's the version that people want because it has more to it. I wanted this original version because it is the original version. It has the Japanese voice acting. I think in Japan the subsistence version has the American voice acting. I don't know if you can even access the Japanese voice acting in this version, but this cost me one whole American dollar. This was 108 yen in the junk section. Now the thing you have to be careful when buying disc-based games in the junk section is that you don't know if they could be super dirty, unreadable by the system's laser, or they could be super scratched up. So take a risk. Oftentimes these won't have anything holding them shut, so you can just pop it open, take a look at the disc, make sure there's not tons of scratches on there, and you'll be good to go. Now another thing that you might find in the overstock area of a hard-off is memory cards. Now the weird thing about memory cards is that you'll find lots of these in the regular section of the store that I'm guessing they have been tested, but my theory with finding lots of memory cards in the junk section for much cheaper than what you'll find elsewhere is simply because it takes a lot of time to try and write something and read something off of the memory card. Lots of hard-offs make their money on volume. You've got lots of people bringing in collections of old stuff that they just want to get rid of. And the person working the sales counter just isn't going to have the time to be reading and writing data to all of the memory cards that come in. So, take a risk, pick up a PlayStation memory card for much cheaper than you will find it in the normal section. But then again, no guarantees. So let's move on to consoles. Oftentimes consoles are sold as is in the junk section. Generally, the idea is you pick something up for parts. And something you might want to pick up for parts is a Nintendo 64. These generally come with no cords. They usually oftentimes work. But what you might want to do, and what I like to do when I go to a hard-off, is to check. Now this system was not in the junk section, but what I did find in the junk section was the memory expansion pack. I've never seen a memory expansion pack fail, and these are things that could be worth up to $20 if you bought them separately. But junk N64s are generally $5. I've not seen anyone go over $5. They can sometimes even be $3. So you can save $17 whole by buying a junk N64 section, and all you got to do is just pop up the top lid to see if it has a memory expansion pack on the inside. So you can save lots of money that way. And if you wanted to say custom paint an N64, you can just pop off the outer shell and you could do some cool stuff with that. So putting that aside, we will next move to the next console, which is a PlayStation 2. Now, why would a PlayStation 2 be in the junk section? Now, oftentimes these will have tags on them telling you what's wrong with the system. Now, the PlayStation 2 does sometimes suffer from its CD laser. sometimes doesn't work, or its DVD laser will fail, so it will play PlayStation 2 games, but it won't play PS1 games, or vice versa. Now, this one I found had a lot of dirt on it, and I suspect the reason it was in the junk section, because afterwards, I took it home, I played it, this is my main console for playing PlayStation 2 games, it works perfectly fine. So why would it have been in the junk section? Because it was dirty. And it didn't have cords. Those are two very interrelated things. For one, because if it's dirty, again, the person at the sales counter does not have the time to wipe this down. So in Japan, because there's lots of options for consoles, you're gonna find the cleaner ones out being sold with anywhere from 10 to 3 months of a guarantee on it where you can exchange it or return it. But if it's dirty, it's not seen as saleable. And I am an American, and I am used to GameStop. So I am used to these things being put through the ringer, usually by children, and them having dents and scratches and being super dirty everywhere. But stuff I find in the junk section is usually in very good condition, except it's got dirt on it. But in Japan, they don't see that as worth even putting in the regular section. And if it doesn't come with cords, like this Super Famicom, a common console and in great condition, I found this in the junk section, I suspect, because when someone brought it in, it didn't have any cords. It wasn't worth putting, because you have to find a controller, the AC adapter, an AV cable to go with this bad boy. So they just stick a $10 sticker on it and hope someone crazy, like me, ends up picking it up. I've had no problems with this Super Famicom, and that is a great deal for a Super Famicom these days. Now, another console you might want to look out for is a Duo R. These things, the reason this was put in the junk section was because it was untested. Now, the reason it was untested was because it did not come with its cords. When I picked this up, it only had its controller with it. Now, the Duo R has a specific AC adapter that works with this model, and I believe no others. At least the original Duo AC adapter does not work with this. So, because this is a very uncommon console, you can find this in junk sections, and it's got, one or two nicks, but it works perfectly fine, and I was able to end up saving $100 on this console simply because I took the risk and I picked it up in the junk section. But again, your mileage may vary. Now, another thing I also wanted to show was a Virtual Boy. Again, something that was untested simply because it was just the head unit. I actually have another Virtual Boy, but one of the eye lenses or something is up with it, so it gives me a fuzzy and really like a digitally fuzzy picture, so it is unusable. But I found this head unit in a junk section. It still has its tag on it for $10. This was 1,080 yen, and it works perfectly, but it did not have any cords. I have the cords here. I've hooked it up. It plays games perfectly well. So that's something you want to look out for. And if you want to save some cash, these normally go for like $70. You pick this up for $10 and then, I don't know, spend $10 or $20 finding the other cords, the mount that goes with the Virtual Boy, the battery pack / controller that goes with it. If you bought them all together with a guarantee, that might cost you $80, or if you're just looking for the part itself, $10. Now, in the proper order, this is the last thing I want to talk about, which is items that have a small problem with it, but again, the people working at Hardoff are not necessarily experts at video games or at these old items, so they don't know how to fix them, and it's also not worth their time. Now, this VMU unit is a good example because when you put this into a Dreamcast, the batteries probably are going to be drained, so it's going to give you that loud squeal sound whenever you start up the console, and that's going to set off red flags for whoever's working the sales counter because they just need to get through this, so they throw it in the junk section because it doesn't work. Even though Dreamcast units, I believe, work because even if they don't have the battery, you can still use it as a memory card. You just can't play the cool games on the screen. But it's an easy enough fix just to pop batteries in here. Another example would be a Pokemon or like any cartridge battery backup game. Pokemon is a good example because those can normally go for $20. I think even sometimes $5 or $10 loose, but you can find it in the junk section for a whole dollar, and then you just buy a battery and switch it out. Now, of course, it's going to depend upon your level of expertise. Sometimes you'll find a duo, a PC Engine Duo in the junk section, but you have to know what you're buying. The PC Engine Duos are notorious for bad capacitors. Same goes for the Game Gear. I see tons of Game Gears in the junk section that are super cheap because they're like $20, $30, and they'll often have a little note on it saying there's a problem with the screen. The audio doesn't come out properly. And that's because there's a problem with the capacitors. So if you know what you're doing and you know what's commonly wrong with the system and you can fix it yourself, you can find things pretty cheap. And for me personally, I actually think it's a cool challenge to take something out of the junk section and restore it. That's, for example, I did find a Duo in a junk section and I was able to recap it, and that is for me something that is personally satisfying. But if you don't have the time, you don't have the expertise, I know I've made a lot of mistakes buying stuff in the junk section, but because this stuff is so cheap, it might not necessarily be a mistake, or if you can have fun fixing things, that can be worth it in and of itself. And the honorable mention reason for why you might want to pick something up from the junk section is simply because there's no explanation for why it's there. Take, for example, this copy of Resident Evil 4 that I found in the junk section. This is actually the best quality Resident Evil 4 that I have ever found in a Japanese video game store. Oftentimes, these were actually a pretty well-sold game, although it's not Overstock, and it's in such a good quality. For some reason, Japanese GameCube games always have this weird, like, the surfaces are coming off, and there will be tears and creases in games that you'll find in the junk section, thus they're seen as unsaleable. But this game is in great condition. There's no reason why this should have been in the junk section. So sometimes people might just throw it in there for whatever reason. Maybe they pick it up in the normal GameCube section. They think, oh, Resident Evil, this is a fantastic game. I definitely want to buy this. Then they get to the junk section. They're like, Resident Evil, this is a piece of junk. I don't want this anymore. And they just throw it in. That might be a reason. I don't know. Unless you're there to see it, who can say? But just to wrap up, there can be a lot of reasons why you might find something in the junk section. You are taking on the risk by picking it up. But for me, either because I enjoy fixing something or I like getting a good deal on something, if you know what's going on with a particular console, knowing that Game Gears and PC Engine Duos have bad capacitors, if you know that Super Famicoms are unbreakable and will never break, so you know that there's not going to be a problem with this system. If you know a Virtual Boy is going to need its cords in order to function and you know it's untested, it might be worth taking that risk. So that's all I have for now. I've been your man in Japan, Jay Contra, saying thanks for watching, see you next time, and mahalo.